This is Musa Matt Meacham Jr. Muhammad broadcasting Providence, Rhode Island, 2022, December 7th. If we talk about God, we have to talk about the devil. Why? Why do we have to talk about the devil? Have you ever seen a child born with two heads? Have you ever seen a child born with swollen face, twisted face? Have you ever seen a child who looks like a monkey? Have you ever seen a child with four legs? Have you ever seen a child with no legs? Have you ever seen a child cut to pieces? What is the worst thing you've ever said? What is the worst thing you've ever seen? What is the worst thing you've ever imagined? All these things happen. Let's talk about God and the devil. But no, I don't. Wait. I'm sorry. How can we talk about God and the devil? God, we can only talk about just God, but the devil is such a tiny, minute thing. How can you talk about God and the devil? You can't equate them. But God created the devil for a reason. And it is not for me, nor I think any other human being to understand why he created the devil. But let's look at this whole thing, this whole universe, just being born, living, and then dying. Being born, suffering, and then dying. Okay, we look at a child, and the child is born with some, what in our minds we would call abnormality or deformity. It's normal we would accept that a person is born with one head here on earth. But in many cases, we have people who are born with two heads and one body. When you look at all the type of things, all type of what we would call tragedies in our normal sense, didn't God create those tragedies? But let's look at those tragedies. Let's say a child is born with three heads and two legs, and he has to live in a community where everyone only has one head. Within that child who has the three heads, it's just that the suffering is not in the child. The suffering is in the perception of the child. The mother see a deformed child that she's delivering. The pain is in her, not in the child. But the child is, and he nurtures and he grows. But the pain is in the perception. In other words, he who perceives suffers more than he which is being perceived, because he which is being perceived accepts it. Do you know people use their hands to walk when they don't have legs? There are people who are born without hands, and they use their hands to walk. Do you know there are people who are born without arms and legs, and they do better than people with arms and legs? They make the adjustments. So suffering is in the eyes of the beholder. If one is born with certain peculiarities or particularities, or in the sense of psychology or sociology, in certain people are born with abnormalities. It's only those who perceive the abnormalities who suffer the most. Those who experience these so-called abnormality just exist. And then here's a man with no arms and no legs, and he drives a car with his mouth. So I think suffering is more of a external thing. It's what we perceive, and that which is being perceived does not suffer because it just accepts what it is. Let's think of existence. Let's think of eternal existence. Let's consider a few things. I pass the graveyards every day, and I watch and I look at the tombstones, and I say, oh, all those people are dead. But then you hear sometimes people say, we never die. We just become another form. But what is the suffering that a mother endures when she loses her child that she has nourished for 9 months? Why am I going in this direction? Because I'm trying to look at human condition, circumstances. I think that if I discuss the dynamics of an artist, then it makes all of us understand the dynamics of God. Think of God as one who creates. You know, if a man has a paintbrush, he paints this thing, then he doesn't want that thing, so he paints something else, or he paints over it, and he paints over it. Or even he can paint about something. He can paint of an artist. He can paint of a thought. Okay, in other words, he can think something that does not exist, but he can paint it on paper before it exists. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Here's an artist, and he's painting. Okay, he's painting. I like this painting, and he paints a man raping a woman. He paints a man raping a woman. Afterwards, hours, maybe days later, there's a man raping a woman. So in other words, I'm saying that the artist is something like God. It's scary to try to equate things with God, but it's just a way of trying to understand this entity, this magnificent thing that creates the work, creates everything, and then we suffer. He creates the pain. Some of us suffer so greatly that we say, I don't want this life anymore. And we take it. So it's quite complicated. And it's an intellectual encounter, it's an intellectual challenge to deal with the issue. I think I better leave whatever it alone for a while. I feel something. Do you think it's, man, I feel something here. Maybe it's good. Let's leave God alone for a second and let me check out. This is Musa, Matt Meacham Jr., Muhammad, checking out in Providence, Rhode Island.